Hey, Brixel! So there are a lot of Final Fantasy XIV dungeon guides out there, and I'm gonna be honest, not impressed. They all seem to be bogged down with irrelevant details like don't stand in the fire, but let's be real. If you're not supposed to stand in the fire, why is it even there? So this is going to be a series of dungeon guides that shirk the crap and really get down to the meat and potatoes of Final Fantasy XIV's dungeon mechanics. Me and my team of Crash Test Dorks have been knee-deep in the muck of Eorzea's dungeons, and we're ready to help guide you to peak Chad gaming god performance. But before we do that, ding the thing if you haven't already, we release new MMO content every dang week, as well as regular streams over on twitch.tv/brixelgaming. Big love to our Patreons, and with that, let's get good at Aurum Vale. So, for this run, I was joined by a team of highly skilled Final Fantasy Special Operatives, a group known as the Crash Test Dorks. We got Shogo, White Mage, and Piss Mopper. Dusaro, Tank Extraordinaire, who some say mainlines Final Fantasy source code directly into his veins. And then we got Asgore, aka Reynard, our bard and resident maid outfit supremacist. They're an example of a team at its ultimate peak, so damn good that they make cat girls quiver at 20 paces. One myth even claims that Yoshi P himself refuses to sleep without a picture of the Crash Test Dorks under his pillow. Now, first things first is that this guide is aimed at DPS players, cause, I mean, you know you're a DPS main. I know you're a DPS main, let's not kid ourselves. But while this is mainly a DPS guide, if you're gonna run Aurum Vale, you're gonna need to understand the other roles. So, the tank has a lot to worry about in this dungeon, especially in the early stages before they remember to turn their tank stance on. So, here's Brixel's pro tip number 1. Always be a team player. Aggro the mobs your tank hasn't gotten around to attacking yet. Rack up some enmity. Trust me, the tank will love you for it. So once your group is nice and spread out in the first room, each tackling its own group of mobs, that's when you'll probably notice your first dungeon-specific mechanic. These wicked cool gill puddles. The secret is that when you kill an enemy while standing in a gill puddle, you'll rack up extra money. The Crash Test Dorks and I tested this mechanic extensively, and the only noticeable downside seems to be that Shogo's MP would rapidly drain while we were all standing in the puddles. Either way, if your noob healer starts freaking out, be gentle with them. Remember, you can set healers straight by simply telling them to readjust. Now, on a serious note, what many sheeple don't know is that during this dungeon's initial development, Yoshi P was approached by capitalist lobbyists. They wanted the Final Fantasy team to slip subliminal propaganda into the game to push their disgusting agenda. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Big Fruit. Big Fruit paid handsomely to have this pro-fruit propaganda slipped into the game, and in particular, this dungeon. What, skeptical? Did you forget Grapegate? Big Fruit managed to get the entire player base talking exclusively about low-poly grapes for an entire week, and you think that's a coincidence? So, as I was saying, you'll notice a lot of fruit representation in this dungeon, and I cannot urge you strongly enough not to engage with it. If you want to see this sort of covert pro-capitalist subliminal advertising removed from the game, we're gonna have to work together. At this point, you'll encounter the first boss, the infamous Luckschmidt. There's been much speculation as to the origin of this boss's name, with the most popular being the tragic tale of a locksmith accidentally enraging a Moogle witch doctor, only to end up cursed roaming the lands as a mortal. As someone very informed in Final Fantasy lore, I can confirm with good authority that in fact Luckschmidt is just a misheard pronunciation of its ancient dragon-given name Luckschmidt. You're welcome. Right, so besides the gill puddles, you'll be dealing with this new mechanic called gill breath, or some shit, I don't know. Who reads tooltips? What you'll notice is that periodically Luckschmidt will exhale a guff of minty fresh breath. The breath doesn't seem to do much on its own, but Brixel pro tip number 2, when you add the breath buff to the previously mentioned gill puddle buff, that's when shit gets real. You'll rake in massive coinage, and your group will basically worship you as a deity. Don't forget to tell your healer to adjust accordingly. Actually, now's a good time to pause and talk about the role of the healer in more detail. At the end of the day, if you die, it is frankly 100% their fault, but try not to hold it against them. Everyone was a Sprout at some point, so you might want to give them some helpful pointers from time to time. For example, if you ever see a white mage casting holy, be sure to correct them. Gently but firmly remind them that spending MP on damage as opposed to keeping me alive is letting the whole team down and really is kind of selfish. Now, once Luckschmidt is defeated, be sure to congratulate the team for supporting your kill. Emphasize how you totally couldn't have done it without them and move along. long. As you progress, once again, don't forget to help the tank out by picking up any mobs they miss. Brixel pro tip number 3, don't stress about leading the mobs to the tank. Any tank worth their salt will come to you. Next up is coin counter, and this is where we're going to be taking things to the next level. Due to the bleating of incapable noobs, coin counter was nerfed and now has telegraphed AoEs. And you're probably saying that you wish you could experience this boss the way God intended. Well, you can. In the before times, you had to watch coin counter to spot the telegraph before an attack so you'd know when it was time to dodge. But with a little creativity, you can recreate that level of challenge by fighting the boss looking at the ceiling. But there's more to it than that. The boss is named Coin Counter, and you've obviously already been wondering where he gets those coins from. The answer? Noobs. His sneak pickpocketing attack involves stealing gil every time he blinks at you. This means that in order to counter the attack, you gotta keep an eye on him at all times. But I know what you're saying. How do you keep an eye on the ceiling while keeping an eye on him? The answer is simple. The only true way to experience this boss is obviously in first person. Coin counter has a few AoE attacks to look out for, but your healer can heal through those. However, it is absolutely essential that your tank does not rotate your boss away from the party. Occasionally, coin counter will engage in a staring contest with a random group member, and it is absolutely imperative that the entire group stare back. Do not break eye contact. If you blink first, you lose. Now, once coin counter is down, this is when Big Fruit really ramps up its subliminal fruit marketing. We got more edible fruit coming up, plus more fruit you gotta attack before it attacks you. Now, as tempted as you might be to kill the fruit before it hatches, don't give Big Fruit the satisfaction. Let it go full turn before dealing damage, which is really the best way to spit in the eye of the capitalist agenda. Only when you have a litter of newborn mobile babies nipping at your heels is it safe to AoE and cleave them all down. And now, the final boss, and I'm gonna level with you. It's not a cakewalk. It's gonna take you everything you've learned so far to pull this off, but if you were paying attention, you're ready. Okay, what are we looking at? We got 1. The mobile fruit we ain't touching until they hatch. 2. The gil puddles we are standing in for mad coinage buffs. 3. The gil breath Omicron variant for even more cash. And 4. The edible fruit all over the floor. But wait, this time it's a little different. You're gonna have to get your entire party to focus the floor fruit as a priority. You don't want that fruit in your post-clear G-pose screenshots, so get them out of here before you even start fighting the boss. Be the revolutionary the world doesn't want, but the one it needs. Once you got the boss down, that's it. You cleared Aurum Vale. Me and the Crash Test Dorks, smashed it in 50 minutes. Don't worry, I'm sure you'll match your pace with some practice, but yeah. Brixel pro rule number 1, throw some love at the healer and commend them for taking your advice and adjusting. Remember, modesty. Just because you carry your team as a DPS doesn't mean your subordinates don't deserve a little love too. So what's your vital advice for Aurum Vale? Leave it in the comments so the community can hone their runs together. And while you're down there, let us know which dungeon we should cover next. Sub if you haven't already, we have new MMO content coming out every week, and if you really like our content, maybe consider becoming a patron. A big shout out to our patrons, and a special shout out to our Guardian tier patrons, Anthony Hodgson, Liam Pullis, Luke Pretorius, and Reynard. Thank you so much for watching. I've been Brixel, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.